Hey guys, welcome back. The series you've all been waiting for, AD, After Disclosure. In this series, we're going to discuss President Eisenhower meeting with aliens in Palm Springs, some of the ET races in contact with humanity. But let's pick up where we left off in the Earthshift series. How according to Conversations with Nostradamus Book 2 by Dolores Cannon, when John the Astrologer does a future hypnotic progression to the year 2087, and he finds out that ET species helped us through the Earthshift, and said, we are now part of the Galactic Federation, one of its newest members. The requirement for membership into the Galactic Federation, in order to be a member of the Galactic Federation, you must know the plan of the Creator, follow the plan of the Creator to be a part of one galaxy consciousness. I'd like to remind you that this book was published in 1987. Now, you might remember in the year 2020, when the former Israeli space security chief said that there was a Galactic Federation. He said that President Trump wanted to reveal the information about aliens to the public, but that the Galactic Federation said that humanity was not ready and it would cause chaos. Those of you familiar with the Ra material, The Law of One, published in 1984, Ra says, I am one of the members of the Confederation of Planets in service to the infinite creator. In this book called The Invitation, published in 1974, he talks of a confederation of planets working together to help humanity. And a similar confederation comes up in the Council of Seven Lights, published in 1958.
I do not believe there are extraterrestrial races out there that would try to contaminate us or kill us.
Races out there that could possibly do that, but they're not allowed to.
By,
I think, some sort of galactic federation.
One of the reasons why we could call it Galactic Federation, because they sometimes call themselves this way.
Those were clips from Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia TV. Here's a clip from the Hannibal TV on YouTube, where he's interviewing the former Canadian Minister of Defense.
I only know about the Galactic Federation, and I don't know much about it, so I shouldn't talk about it. But they are concerned about what's going on in the world, and they have been working through individuals.
It's an intuitively structured system to organize the chaos of the universe.
And that was a definition of it channeled by Elizabeth April. And before you say they're bad, Rick is a galactic criminal, okay? Stay tuned for part 2. Did the U.S. government make a treaty with aliens to allow them to abduct citizens? According to Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper, they did. 34th President Dwight D. Eisenhower allegedly did this on vacation in Palm Springs. So according to the book, in 1953, astronomers noticed strange craft orbiting the equator. And through radio contact, they were able to set up a face-to-face meeting with the beings on those ships. The movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind is a fictionalized version of it. I've already done a video on this, so I pinned it to the top of my page. Also check out, which is in this chapter, The True Story of E.T., and I'll put them in the AD playlist. Meanwhile, a race of humanoid aliens landed in the Homestead Air Force Base in Florida and said, whatever you do, do not make a deal with those aliens that are circling the equator. Now, this race of humanoid aliens said, we would like to help you, but with your spiritual development. And they said, we won't be giving you any technology because you're not even spiritually evolved enough to handle the technology you already have. And these humanoid aliens said the only way we're going to help you is if you agree to disarm all nuclear weapons. And the US government was like, nah, we're going to work with those aliens that you say are evil because they're going to give us weapons. So President Eisenhower planned a trip to Palm Springs. And the meeting was set to happen at Edwards Air Force Base. Palm Springs, Edwards Air Force Base. And this happened on February 20th of 1954. According to this, Eisenhower was spirited to the Air Force Base. So then I found this Washington Post article where they discuss the possibility of this happening. And this part's not in the book. On that night that Eisenhower was spirited to a military base, the Associated Press reported that he died of a heart attack in Palm Springs, and then 2 minutes later retracted the statement. This was actually a year before Eisenhower's heart attack. But now let's see what this treaty was all about. So the aliens would give us advanced technology, weapons, and the aliens would agree to not make treaties with any other Earth nation in exchange for abducting humans on a limited but periodic basis, with the stipulation that humans would not be harmed and would not remember the experience, and that they would be returned to their point of abduction, that they would have to provide a list of everyone that they've abducted to a group which was then developed called the Majesty 12, sometimes referred to as Majestic 12 or MJ12. Now, according to the Washington Post article, the Nordics were the humanoid race, and it was the Greys that we ended up doing the deal with. President Eisenhower gave a statement that he was only in Palm Springs to go to the dentist, and he attended church in Los Angeles the next morning. What's interesting, according to William Cooper, 4 people were at this meeting, one of which being the Archbishop of Los Angeles, who also attended church that next morning. Coming up, the Area 51 caller that tried to expose the treaty. Let's finish out this whole Eisenhower treaty with aliens thing. So as we know, he was the 34th president. But before that, in World War II, he was chief of staff of the Army and then the Supreme Allied Commander. But that night in Palm Springs was not his first run-in with aliens. On December 13th, 1944, the chief and commander, Dwight Eisenhower, wrote up a press release which became this New York Times article, claiming that mysterious floating mystery spheres might have been a German weapon. These mystery weapons that did no harm were called Foo Fighters, and some of them were captured on film. The term UFO was not coined until almost 10 years later in 1953. As you see here, Foo Fighter was used to describe various UFOs. And those Foo Fighters were not the first time either. 2 years earlier, there was the Battle of LA. It was initially said that California was being attacked by Japan, but later the government said that it was basically a weather balloon that started all the shooting. In this declassified document, FDR talks to Eisenhower about how they need to figure out practical uses for the atomic secrets they learned from studying celestial devices, as well as this document addressed to the Special Committee on Non-Terrestrial Science and Technology. Keep in mind the Corona crash, better known as the Roswell crash, didn't happen until 1947. But 1 month prior to the crash, this document talks about relationships with inhabitants of celestial bodies. In the previous video, some people asked, why do the aliens need permission? But as we can see from this document, it was the US government that says we need to establish an agreement with legal regulations upon which future relationships should be based, and that such agreement would be necessary. Then they discuss the possibilities if these celestial bodies, or EBEs, extraterrestrial biological entities, desire to settle here. It states that if they're politically similar to us, then they would be considered individuals. If they have political differences, then they would have the right to colonize. But a new form of colonization would have to be conceived, possibly with the help of the United Nations. And this letter was written by Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer and no other than Albert Einstein. Now let's go back to that night in 1954 that Eisenhower allegedly made a treaty with aliens. According to Behold to Pale Horse, 4 other people besides Eisenhower were in attendance, one being Gerald Light, a metaphysical researcher. This is a letter between Gerald Light and Meade Lane. He was a pioneer of ufology. The letter confirms the 4 people who were there, confirms that Eisenhower was spirited over to the airbase, that they met with Etherians, and that everyone there was in a state of complete collapse. Let's talk about the Area 51 caller. Coast to Coast AM, an AM radio show. It was originally hosted by Art Bell, and we referenced this in part 1 and 2 of the Apocalypse series, because he was the person who interviewed Malachi Martin. But in 1997, an Area 51 employee, former, recently discharged employee, called into the live show to expose what was happening.
A former employee. I was let go on a medical discharge about a week ago, and I've kind of been running across the country. I don't know where to start. They're gonna they'll triangulate on this position really soon. Okay, well, what we're thinking of as aliens are they're extra dimensional beings that, in an earlier precursor of the space program made contact with. They are not what they claim to be. They have infiltrated a lot of aspects of the military establishment will be more easily controllable.
You're going to need to go to YouTube to listen to the full thing. Type in Area 51 caller, because the entire radio station gets knocked off air. Was it the government? Was it aliens? A couple weeks later, another person called claiming that it was a hoax and they were the one who pretended to be the caller. So Art is like, I don't know, that person seemed pretty scared. Can you reenact it for me? Because that was really good acting. Mind you, the guy sounds nothing like the original guy. The guy attempts to do it, but it sounds terrible. And that doesn't explain how the whole entire station got kicked off the air. I don't believe it was a hoax. But notice how he says they made contact with an earlier precursor of the space program, and that these beings were not what they claimed to be. And according to Behold the Pale Horse, there was 2 races of aliens that were trying to make a deal with our government at that time. One that promised weapons and technology in exchange for abductions, and a seemingly positive race of humanoid aliens who did not make a deal with the space program, who wanted to help us spiritually advance. And I believe it was that race of aliens who took over a British news station in 1977. That's coming up right now. Okay, so let's jump in right where we left off. In 1977, during British nightly news, someone, this has still never been explained. No one has ever been caught for this. Something took over the news with this message.
All captured prisoners of war are given negotiation being arrested. In Australia, Mr. Kerry Packer's cricketers are still yes, it's High Court decision. It's the ban on them playing test matches.
This is the voice of Enoch, representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you. For years, you have seen.
You're gonna have to watch the full thing on YouTube, but here's some highlights. Okay, so he calls himself Vrillon, a representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command. We're gonna get more into this when we get into the alien races, but it's believed that the Ashtar Command is a part of the Galactic Federation, and that Ashtar is from this star system, the Pleiades. A race of humanoid aliens are believed to come from this star system and want to help us with our spiritual development.
We have done to your brothers and sisters all over this, your planet Earth. We come to warn you of the destiny of your race and your world, so that you may communicate to your fellow beings across the passes into the new age of Aquarius. The new age will be a time of great peace and liberation for your race. And only your rulers are made aware of the forces that can the time for conflict is now past, and the race of which you are a part may proceed to the higher stages of its evolution. There are many false habits and guides that present operating on your path. They will suck your energy from you, the energy you call money, and will put it to evil.
So like I said, go watch the whole thing on YouTube, but some things to note. They talk about our spiritual evolution. They talk about disarming the weapons. They talk about the New Age. They talk about the Age of Aquarius. They talk about coming disasters and false prophets. They talk about the disasters coming, the false prophets, evil forces controlling leaders, draining people of energy through money, and that you must grow and evolve spiritually in order to escape the disasters that are coming. Sounds a lot like everything we talked about in the Earthshift series. Now, what's interesting is not everyone heard the same name. Some people heard Astron, and some people heard Brahmaha, which is very close to Brahma, the Sanskrit word for creator. The newscaster came back on and said it was a hoax, but people didn't believe it. Then they went back to their regularly scheduled programming. Looney Tunes. This is a very important question. If we're a planet of free will, how can they abduct us without our consent?
Free will, because they need to. If somebody repeatedly say that they do not want to have something to do with them, they respect that. But if somebody on like planet Earth is pretty important to them, they will kind of find some way around that.
Okay, so I'm gonna summarize what he said. Since they have this master line that has a vision for how the universe has to end up, then there's individuals on Earth who are very important to that mission. So if one of those individuals does not want to be involved in this abduction, they might time travel and ask a future incarnation of yourself thousands of years from now for permission to abduct you today. And since it is your soul, you can consent. And now I want to share something interesting with you.
Fake stagecraft using clone programmed life forms, and then having them wake up in a room with staged, surgeons there.
Are you saying that the UFOs are fake?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they're right. They're.
But is there a craft? Are you saying that there are craft?
There are craft. Yeah, they're real craft that we reverse engineered, not the extraterrestrials.
It's
craft.
not just like.
So that's an interview with Emery Smith, season 1, episode 4 of Cosmic Disclosure, where he says that the government has been staging abductions since the 50s. And that majority of alien abductions are actually part of a PSYOP operation conducted by the government, which is the reason why so many people have the exact same experience. He claims that this is behind any of the negative abductions. And if that's the case, that PSYOP is breaking the laws of free will. Okay, I was gonna save this for later in the series, but I might as well just address it now. This is a very typical comment. Every time I mention aliens, there's a bunch of people who say that they are demons. First of all, there's information available of about 80 different alien races. And to say that anything that is not human or Jesus is a demon is like, come on. That's like saying that all humans are good or all humans are bad. We clearly know that's not true. So if just within our species, you can't even say that we are all good or all bad, how could you say that trillions of species, or even the dozen that the Earth governments deal with, are all good or all bad? In even the last video, we have 2 races of aliens, one that were humanoid and one that were most likely gray. And one of them wanted to give us weapons. The other race wanted to disarm weapons and teach us how to spiritually evolve. Now let's go back to Conversations with Nostradamus. What we talked about in part 1, how there is a Galactic Federation, which is an alliance in the galaxy. This is an alliance that believes in the creator and follows the plan of the creator. Now let's look at the next part, which I was saving because I didn't want to scare you. But clearly people want to fearmonger in the comments, so it needs to be addressed. We're all of the extraterrestrial helpers of the highest intention. I was wondering if there were people who came from other planets that were negative. The answer: there is another federation that could be considered negative. They are about 300 light years from the central planet, the Sun. They were around at the time of the Earth shift, but they were prevented from taking part in the rescue by members of the United Federation. Did people from the negative federation have any connection to Earth before the Earth shift? That federation had been influencing the planet prior to the shift, yes. In the old world, they were called demons, but in actuality, they are a force within the universe. As you know, the universe is eternal and unlimited, but there are negative entities. In the Law of One, Ra is a part of the Confederation of Planets in love and light of the one infinite creator. Also in the Law of One, they talk about the Orion Crusaders. The Confederation and the Orion Crusaders are positive and negative, and they are both involved in human evolution. Now let's talk about Dr. Courtney Brown. He studied with the Monroe Institute to learn remote viewing. And what he wanted to do was remote view the Galactic Federation headquarters. And he learned a lot about the Galactic Federation, but also about these 2 other federations, which are opposing forces in our galaxy. The Draconian Reptilian Empire, also known as Syakar, and the Orion Alliance, also known as the Orion Collective. We are going to get into the other alien races, but please do not keep saying everything is a demon. Hey guys, welcome back. So today I want to shed some light on a very controversial topic: grays. So this information is going to be coming from Gaia TV. my favorite show, Cosmic Disclosure. And this is going to be season 15, episode 3, and season 15, episode 6. This is Tim. He works as a tactical advisor for the German covert government, and he works with a program that deals with non-terrestrial beings. Okay, so first and foremost, grays. There's many types of gray species throughout the universe, and one common misconception is that they are bad or evil. And we're going to get into that. But first, I want to differentiate. There's something called the small grays, and these ones are about 3 feet tall. These are called PLFs, programmed life forms. They're basically robots created from some organic materials and some technology. Then we have the taller grays, which are just called grays. So in the universe, there's like a trinity to create an individual: a soul, a body, and a mind. However, that body does not need to be organic. It can be artificial. And the grays do have genetically engineered bodies. Okay, so Tim from Cosmic Disclosure has worked with grays directly. He said he's had countless face-to-face meetings. He said that no matter how much you prepare for the meeting, your body is going to shake and convulse when you're in their presence, just because the frequential difference. He was able to communicate them using a tablet. So basically, he said on the top of the tablet would have hieroglyphs of their language, and then the bottom part was in German, his language. And this is what they told him. The grays, who are from Orion, they say that they are from a previous version of the universe, and that basically they were so logical and so focused on what was the best thing for their whole species. They felt it was no longer a necessity and more of a hindrance for them to have organic bodies. Okay, so Tim talks a lot about the gray system. It's like society, but because it's spread out in so many places, it's called a system. It's an authoritarian system. Each gray is an individual and does have their own free will, but every decision is made from the top of the master line. And they have 3 master lines. So these master lines are basically 3 parallel realities of their society. And it's a hierarchical system, so there's one individual at the top of each of these 3 parallel realities. But because they are a time-traveling species, they discovered that one of these master lines would fail. So they destroyed it. And now they have a lot of trauma, and they're really worried about any of the other master lines failing, because then they would cease to exist, which is part of the reason that they're interfering with Earth people. They say that they're not interested in Earth as a planet or humanity as a whole, that they're only interested in specific individuals. Now, coming up in the next part, we're going to discuss the master line a little bit more, because the person in charge of the master line is the person with the most credits, which is basically their form of money. All right, we're jumping right back in. Once again, this information is coming from Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia TV, Season 15, Episodes 3 and 6. Coming from Tim, who worked for the German covert government and worked directly face-to-face with gray aliens. This is what he claims to be first-hand information directly from grays. Okay, so as we said in the last part, they live in an authoritarian system. It is also a capitalist system. And it is all based on these master lines. So the master lines are basically different realities. Okay, so the master lines are basically 3 different realities. At the top of each of the 3 master lines is the person with the most credits. They receive credits by completing missions. Every mission is going to be based off of the top of the master line, that person's plan, because that person controls the entire gray system. So for example, it would be like the Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk's, or the real richest men in the world who we don't have the names of, but okay. We'll just use the celebrity ones for this. However, their system is not really based on greed. Their system is based on the vision. So since they're a time-traveling species, they know how each timeline ends. And they've already screwed up one of their master lines and had to destroy it because they went to a failed timeline. So since they're traumatized and don't want that to happen again, their leader of their master line has the vision of what is the greatest plan for the universe's evolution. And everyone below them has to follow the vision of that person. So it combines vision, their economy, and a hierarchical system. Now, it's also believed that our economic system is originated from the grays. And the World Trade Center was pointing at the Orion star system. The grays also claim to be the fathers of humanity. Yes, they did genetically modify us. There's 12 alien races that we know of that have done that. But they say that they're the origin not because they manipulated our DNA, but because they created the Fibonacci sequence, which they call the Fibonacci code, a creation code. Okay, so let's get back to the small grays. These are the ones you're gonna see like in abductions. And that's because people will just use credits to pay for an artificial body. And going back to the body, mind, soul, the body doesn't have to be real. And who said it only has to be one body? So sometimes they put their consciousness in several of these robot bodies. But you don't need to be a gray to purchase a small gray programmed life form. They actually sell them to many different alien races and even some humans. But since you're not a gray, you're not a part of their credit system. So then they just entrap you into a soul contract with them. Coming up, I'm going to answer the question of why would they ask the government permission to abduct us? Hey guys, welcome back. So here's another question that I wanted to answer. Why wouldn't the aliens just abduct us instead of asking permission from the government and creating a whole treaty? This information is coming from Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia TV, specifically from Tim, the tactical advisor who works for the covert government in Germany. He was asked a similar question on the show. So according to him, the reason that the Greys went to our government is because he said each alien species will basically act in a way that is natural to their own system. So because the Greys live in a governmental system, an authoritarian capitalistic system, which follows a master line, which follows a leader, then they find it most appropriate, take me to your leader. However, he does say that there's other species of aliens that don't have governments, and those type of species typically do not contact governments unless it is necessary. Those type of species that are more individualistic will contact individuals directly, which is why we hear a lot about Pleiadians and Nordics and how they channel messages directly to people. And if you've been watching the whole time, we talk about the Pleiadians in the Earthshift series, and we also talk about the Pleiadians in the Mandela Effect series. And we also heard them come up earlier in this series in the Vrillon broadcast of 1977. Now, they are also very invested in the evolution of the human race. And theirs is also for self-benefiting reasons, just as it is for the Greys. The Greys are trying to ensure that their master timeline does not fail. So they need humans to evolve and ascend in order for their timeline to continue and for them to create hybrid beings with us because their inorganic bodies are not cutting it in the future. So basically they do need to integrate with human bodies. Side note, if you've heard of the tall whites, according to Tim from Cosmic Disclosure, he was told directly from gray aliens that that is their race of hybrids and that they created that race so that they would be able to interfere with Earth. That since they have a creation here, including partially us because they have altered our genetics, they're allowed to interfere in some ways because they are genetically connected. So coming up, we're going to talk about the Pleiadians, which is my favorite alien race. But before we finish out with the Greys, I want to emphasize that they do not have the same range of emotions that we do. And since they're a time-traveling species, they know how everything ends, how all the timelines end. So that impacts their decision-making. They don't really care if they scare the shit out of you. Because if you becoming aware of them is going to evolve the human race, then they don't really care about the means of getting there. They only care about the end result. Okay, so I wanted to answer this question too. The Greys are just us in the future, and that is what we will evolve into. So this information is coming again from Tim, the tactical advisor for the German government. And this comes up in the newest episode. I believe it was this episode right here, season 16, episode 8. So they asked Tim, are they us in the future? And he said, their species is not. However, some of them are. So their species is from a previous version of our universe, and they existed long before humanity ever did, or any forms of humanoid species. They actually existed before our universe existed. However, they say the reason that so many people feel that they are us in the future is because he says there's many humans that are alive right now that are going to commit themselves into the gray system in their future lives. So some of the Greys that come and contact people are future versions of themselves. So sometimes like a gray could abduct you, and it could be you in a future incarnation, or something that's connected to one of your future incarnations, or something that used to be a human in its past life. However, there is a hybrid race, not the tall whites that I referenced in an earlier video, but another human hybrid race that is currently being created. And this explains a lot of the people who have memories of being impregnated during abductions, and then also have like faint memories of giving birth to a child that they never did on some type of craft. It's very common. So that's real. And that's not against anyone's free will. Those women who are experiencing that agreed to be a part of the hybrid program, because basically the grays will go extinct without this hybrid program. This is also part of the reason why there was these treaties for them to abduct people. It's because they were collecting DNA. So what about the babies? This gets answered in Dolores Cannon, 3 Waves of Volunteers in the New Earth book. She asks, what about the kids? Where are they? Who takes care of them? They said that there are souls who dedicate their lives to taking care of the hybrid children. And then Dolores asks, well, isn't that sad? These kids never get to meet their mom. And the answer that she got was that just like you chose your life to be a human, that soul chose its life to be a hybrid baby. That soul knew the choice it was making, and it made that decision because of the bigger picture at hand. It wanted to be involved in a bigger mission. So I wanted to give you guys some additional information about the grays from a different source, specifically about the small grays. So this information is going to come from Dolores Cannon, Keepers of the Garden. This information is coming from chapter 23 called Denial of Access. So Dolores was asking Phil, under hypnosis, for more information about the abductions. The answers that come through is that they have volunteered for this mission that is happening on Earth at this time on a collective level. They say they do not want to call it experiment because the outcome is already known. The ultimate outcome on a collective level, not the individual and personal outcomes. Those you will create on your own. So she asks about the beings that are doing the abductions. They say that they are humanoid in nature and are distant relatives, and that some of them are androids. And this information lines up with what we've heard about these small grays being robots, technically. She says, what do these creatures look like? Those that you have described as gray in appearance and small in stature are typical. The eyes, of course, are the most prominent facial feature. They are the main communication receptor. Do their eyes function the same as human eyes? In a sense, but they collect more information and a wider spectrum of our visible light, as well as infrared and ultraviolet regions of light. Do they have pupils? Yes, but not to capture light. But the pupils are used to receive. She asks about different bodily functions like breathing and eating. The answer is that they don't, and they don't have emotions, although they are empathetic to react to emotions. How are these creatures produced? Now, what's interesting is this does line up with what Tim from Cosmic Disclosure said. There's a central part of the planet which holds the energies of a governmental nature. An analogy would be the county or state in which your political system lies. This is how they're created. Like what Tim said, they're being created through a governmental structure. They have mental responsiveness, but not a mental identity. She asks, are they cloned or manufactured? Yes, they are both. But the mental energy is given by a life force. They are manufactured because it's more of an assembly than a growth. They are not a living life force. These are androids that are responsive to your mental energies. Dolores asks, is there any experiments with humans and the androids? They said not so, because there is no procreation of these androids. These androids do not directly communicate with people on Earth. They only communicate with their superiors. She asks, who are their superiors? Those who are responsible for the particular mission that they're on, which this lines up with what Tim was saying about these missions and the credits and basically the small grays being sent out to complete these missions based off of the Master Line's vision. They say that some of these visitations and abductions are to prepare people for the coming Earth shift, and that the volunteers are training in their sleep. Many of the people who are experiencing these abductions have experienced the destruction of a planet in their previous life. And many of them are Pleiadian in nature. And to be clear, this was about the small grays. Have you guys ever wondered where this idea of aliens being green came from? On August 21st, 1955, On the border of Kelly and Hopkinsville, Kentucky, a family of 11 people, 5 adults and 7 children, experienced the most well-documented encounter of all time. To the Kelly Hopkinsville case. Okay, so one of the family members goes outside to get some water from the well because it's 1955, a farmhouse, and there's no running water and no phone line. And he sees a ship floating in the sky and landing behind some trees. And he said that the exhaust looked like a rainbow. So he goes inside and tells his family, and they all just think he's playing a prank on them until 12 of these things come to the house and they all get their guns and start shooting. But these little goblin-looking things are unaffected by their shots. So the family holds their ground for like 4 hours until finally the mother sees one outside the window. They blast the hell out of these things. Nothing's hurting them. So they all get in their cars and drive to the police station. So here's some drawings that were made from descriptions that the family gave. So as you can see, they're very close. And the next day, it was a media sensation. Even though the family described these beings as silver or wearing some type of metallic outfit, the media chose to say little green men from space. More drawings by the family. And this is an image here from Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Yes, that one, in charge of Project Blue Book. And here's the declassified card from Project Blue Book, which of course said it was a hoax, even though it's never been debunked. Hey guys, welcome back. And now, the Pleiadians. Originating in the Pleiades star system, let's start at the beginning. Also known as the Seven Sisters from Greek mythology, people from this star system are said to be some of the original designers of the human race.
There was an ancient war, possibly in the Pleiadian star cluster, which is mentioned in Homer's Iliad and the Bible and everything else. Refugees fled that region. Some ended up in the Orion, some ended up in the Sirius star system. So some, I believe, ended up on this Nibiru planet.
In ancient Sumeria. This is quite amazing here because it has 3 dots in a row that follows with an arrow. I'm pretty convinced this is Orion. The Pleiades as being the collective cluster, and it's a definite cluster. Sumerian seal. Sitchin made this one quite famous. Museums like the British Museum insist that this is the Pleiades. It's so fantastic to see the Pleiades in such detail. Yes, it is the Pleiades. Historians in the Berlin Museum, where this original is kept, speak of it as the Pleiades.
So what you saw was 3 ancient Sumerian artifacts that appeared to portray the Pleiades. But that's not all. And if you're in the comments telling me I should read the Bible, the Pleiades, also called the 7 stars, are mentioned 7 times in the Bible. And not only the Pleiades, but also Orion, where the Greys originate, and Arcturus, which we'll be getting into later in this series. Again in the Bible, the sweet influences of the Pleiades. The Book of Revelation, the 7 stars, and Orion. Again in the Book of Revelation. But that's not all. It shows up in Hebrew texts in the Talmud, as well as Islamic texts. The Prophet Muhammad mentioned the Pleiades. In fact, the former princess of Iran was named after the Pleiades. They're found in Cherokee myths, as well as Hopi. Here's an interesting one. They linked the Pleiades to Devil's Tower in Wyoming, Navajo folklore, ancient Vedic texts, Indonesia, Thailand. Here's an interesting one. Up until 1950, Jehovah's Witnesses were taught that the Pleiadian star Alcyone was likely to be the site of the throne of God. In Australia, these Egyptian hieroglyphs are found in the outback. The Aboriginal elders said that they were created by the Pleiadians themselves. And since I started this alien series, every car in front of me is a Subaru, which is Japanese for Pleiades. Stay tuned. So before we go any further, we're gonna have to talk about the Anunnaki. So the Anunnaki is a word that's often used to describe the gods who came from the sky in the ancient Sumerian artifacts and tablets. And for those of you that might not be aware, ancient Sumeria is modern-day Iraq. And during the war in Iraq, many of these artifacts and tablets were stolen and smuggled into the US and were acquired by Hobby Lobby. Yes, Hobby Lobby. They were shipped as imported tiles. So back to the Anunnaki. So this is a bit of a divided topic among the alien enthusiasts. Some believe that the Anunnaki are one specific race of aliens. Personally, based on what I've read and seen and the opinions of people who have interpreted these tablets, the Anunnaki just means from the heavens or from the sky, or some say that it means princely seed. And many people believe that the Anunnaki are actually a mix of several different races that were manipulating the genetics of humans at that time. As we saw in the previous part, many Sumerian artifacts are depicting the Pleiades star cluster. As we see in this book by Barbara Marciniak, Bringers of the Dawn. This book is one of my favorites. We're going to be getting into it. If you want, you can listen to the audiobook for free. If you go to my YouTube, go to audiobooks playlist, it'll be the first one on that list. Now, this book is channeled from Pleiadians, and the Pleiadians giving this information claim that they are from the future and that their ancestors are our ancestors. That basically their ancestors gave their DNA to the original designers of the human race. So the New Age movement Pleiadians are going to be different than the Anunnaki Pleiadians. I want to make that clear. Most of the time when people are channeling Pleiadians, they're channeling Pleiadians from the future, not our ancestors. So we saw in the last part how the Pleiadians are acknowledged in all different cultures and all different religions. So we also see the Orion star system depicted. And according to Tim on Cosmic Disclosure, these grays from Orion also claim to have genetically modified humans and be partially responsible for creating us. Every time the Pleiades or the Seven Sisters or the Seven Stars come up in the Bible, Orion also comes up in the Bible. And then there's another common theme in all of these creation stories across all these cultures. A serpent-like being. Is it possible that junk DNA or non-coding DNA is actually holding the DNA of many different alien species? What if alien disclosure is not going to be aliens revealing themselves, but us discovering that we ourselves are from an off-planet origin? And has the Bible told us that the whole time? We're going to look at this and expand on the Book of Enoch next. Okay, so we left off talking about the Anunnaki, the ancient story of gods coming from the sky, teaching the humans, and then mixing with them, creating a hybrid species. And we briefly see a similar story in the book of Genesis. In Genesis 6, we see that the sons of God married the daughters of humans, and this is where they talk about the Nephilim. A lot of versions of the Bible have translated this to mean giants, but also interpreted as hybrid sons of fallen angels. Now, also in the book of Genesis, we hear about Enoch, who was a descendant of Adam and a great-great-grandfather to Noah, as in Noah's Ark. We hear this juicy little detail about Enoch. He walked faithfully with God, then he was no more, because God took him. And you know what? But you know what? Before Nostradamus, before the book of Revelation, we have our OG apocalyptic prophecy from our boy Enoch. Okay, now the book of Enoch is not included in the Bible. However, it is referenced in the Bible. So Jude in the New Testament, the book before Revelation where it all goes down, Jude's basically like, Enoch, the one that was related to Adam, he prophesied it. He said it all. He said the Lord was going to cometh with tens of thousands of his saints. So now the book of Enoch was not exactly one book. So parts like this were found with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Then it was translated and compiled all together. However, in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, they always kept the book of Enoch as a part of the Bible. And they believe to have the original translation, which is almost identical to some of the Hebrew translations. Now, the first part of the book of Enoch talks about the Watcher and expands on that part about the sons of God having children with the daughters of man. And here's the names of some of the angels / aliens / sons of God / Anunnaki, and according to Enoch, what each of them taught humans. What's interesting is a lot of them are doing astrology, astronomy, constellations, the clouds, the moon, the signs of the earth. Not only does this mimic what many ancient traditions were saying, the things they taught us and what they represent and their characteristics are very reminiscent of the Greek and Roman gods. Okay, so just for fun, here's some other alien-sounding stuff. So a windstorm came out of the north, an immense cloud and flashing lightning surrounded by a brilliant light, and the center of the fire looked like glowing metal. But let's go back to the book of Genesis. God God said, let's make them in our image, in our likeness, as if implying a group. And what exactly is the story of Adam and Eve telling us? What if the garden wasn't a garden at all? Why have cultures around the world intertwined the story of a serpent or a dragon into their creation? While we're on the topic of creation, DNA, and aliens, let's see what good old Dolores has to say in my favorite Dolores book, Keepers of the Garden. So here in chapter 13, Dolores is putting Phil under hypnosis in front of a group of people. You might remember Phil from the Apocalypse series. He was one of the people that she put under to contact Nostradamus. So here in this situation, Phil regresses to a past life where he comes to Earth on a ship, is collecting samples, and then is going to take them back. Dolores asks, where are you going to take the samples to? He says they're gathered and sent to the central and super universe, where they are considered and analyzed, and an adaptability study will be done, and then they would determine if Earth was ready to have life. So Dolores says, what is the central place? And now this is really interesting. Phil says it's Havana, the central or super universe. And this made me think of the Urantia book. Paper 14, the central and divine universe. This central planetary family is called Havona. It is far distant from the local universe of Nebadon. Oh, and if you don't know what the Urantia book is, it's like the other Bible. Okay, so the Urantia book, there's a lot of mystery around who wrote it, but the story is that there was this businessman in Chicago who started having these episodes. He'd kind of like check out, and this other being would talk through him. And this being started explaining exactly the entire beginning of creation, to all the universes, to everything that has happened. A lot of stuff about Jesus, stuff about like Lucifer the fall, basically everything that's in the Bible, everything that's in like a bunch of different religions, explains like a lot of philosophical stuff. It's like, I've been working on reading it for 8 years. Anyway, they started writing down what the guy was saying in his episodes, and that's what this whole Urantia book is, and they never made money off of it and just released it. So back to Dolores. Phil's in a past life where he's taking samples from Earth, way before there was ever animal life here. So Dolores asks, like, do you recognize a god? He said all civilizations recognize a god. Those who are advanced recognize the same god. For he is one, he is all. So then she asks about the ships. He starts explaining that the motherships do not penetrate the atmosphere, that it's scout ships that are sent out into the atmosphere. So then Dolores is like, are these the ships that did the seeding? And he says, no, they were just collecting samples. The seeding was done by a separate and commissioned group of ships, whose sole purpose was to seed the planet. You may now be told that human life, and many other life forms on this planet, were seeded intentionally and was grown from a garden state. Where did the seeds come from originally? If we told you one place, you would think it's better than others. The seeds were brought from many places. There was stock from many races. Okay, so I want to finish telling you, because a lot of cool stuff happened in that chapter. Okay, so we're talking about Keepers of the Garden by Dolores Cannon, where in chapter 13, Phil, the hypnosis subject, is in a past life collecting samples from Earth to see if the central of the super universe thinks that Earth is ready for animal life. Dolores asks where he's from originally before he came to Earth to collect these samples. He says he's from Andromeda, and he says they're still making visitations to Earth at this time. Dolores is like, this present time? The present time of this book was 1984. Dolores asked, are you the ones that seeded it, meaning the Andromedans? It said, no, they're just collecting samples. The seeding has been done by many different places, but that the seeding was intentional, and that Earth is basically a garden. And like we're talking about, what if the Garden of Eden isn't exactly a garden? What if garden is the closest word to what an alien can describe? Because in 1984, when aliens were channeling through Phil, they're like, think about it like a garden. And then they begin to say that this is kind of the process that happens. You on Earth are eventually going to seed other places too. And they said not as much physical, but spiritual. The things that you learn on Earth, you're going to take with you into different places around the universe. And they say the concept of seeding a planet is kind of like a sunflower. In its early stages, it is merely there. However, when it blossoms into a flower, it is open for all to see. And then it'll eventually give off parts of itself in order to spread more of its kind. Earth is on the verge of blossoming and opening up its flower for the universe to see. Would we be the seeds of the flower? Dolores asks. Some will be, yes. So then Dolores is like, well, what about creation in the Bible? And they basically say that evolution and creation are both true. That there was evolution of the body, but there was the divine gift of life. That is spirit. And that they are complementary to each other. Dolores says, can you tell me how that doesn't contradict the Bible? And they said, tell us how it does. Dolores wants to ask, what is the purpose of the ships coming to Earth? The UFOs all have their particular own missions. Some are seeding, some are exploration, some are charting, some are graphing. This is a large undertaking. It is not merely casting the seeds in the wind and come what may. This is a very well-planned and orchestrated ordeal. We're talking of a physical seeding, such as planting cells in a hospitable environment, like the water of a lagoon or in a swamp, or on the forest floor, and allowing them to germinate. So Dolores is like, you must admit that's a radical idea. And I said, this is not an idea. We wish to stress this. This is not simply an idea. This is history. Is it possible? Creation, evolution, and aliens are all... Now back to the Anunnaki. This is Anu. Anu was the supreme god of ancient Sumer and the ultimate king of the Anunnaki. And you know I'm not going to bring you the basic information. So this book, The Pleiadian Agenda, by Barbara Handclough, not to be confused with Barbara Marciniak. We'll get into that in the next video. So this book is channeled from Pleiadians, but not just Pleiadians. Barbara Handclough channels Anu himself. So according to Anu, he came to Earth 450,000 years ago from the planet Nibiru. That Nibiru used to be a part of the Sirius star system, but that it basically got absorbed by our solar system a long time ago. And it only becomes visible to us every 36,000 years. That ancient Egypt was originally established by Syrians, but that Anu eventually took over Egypt as well. That the Anunnaki are the ones that constructed a net around our planet, which prevents us from being multidimensional. Okay, so this is not everything. In this book, she also channels reptilians and Lucifer. Don't get scared. And of course, information from the Pleiadians. So I'm going to give you the highlights of what they all had to say. Okay, so the Pleiadian that is the main one channeling in this book is Satya, and she comes from Alcyone. She claims that our sun is actually the 8th star of the Pleiadian star cluster. That Pleiadians from Alcyone are very loving, but there are other types of Pleiadian planets. Anu was the father god of Nibiru, and that they had cities, a temple culture, and socialization, which is what they brought here to ancient Sumer. He directed indigenous people to construct temples here on Earth, but he was creating those temples out of greed, control, and power for the reasons of competition and jealousy. And this has been ingrained into humanity. And it created the Mogul mindset because creating and building was supposed to be about freedom, not about power and greed. About 13,000 years ago, when the world was going through a shift and there was flooding, that Pleiadians felt our pain, interfered, and moved us to safe locations, which they said was a horrible mistake. They said that it created victimhood inside the mind of humans, and that they would have overcome fear, but instead compassion turned to pity and disempowered humans. They say that the beings from Nibiru are a metallic species. The reason they wanted gold is because it's how to open the portals to enter 3D. And the Anunnaki are responsible for the patriarchy. Okay, so I'm sure you guys are interested in some of the other stuff that came through in the Pleiadian Agenda book. In the last part, we shared some information about the Anunnaki from this book. However, there's some other interesting information. Don't shoot the messenger. Okay, so the Anunnaki started in ancient Sumer. Then their influence took over Egypt, and then Rome. And then when Rome fell, they took over the Roman Catholic Church. But let's go back a second. Why did they do that? Okay, so you know how we said Nibiru only comes around every 36,000 years? Well, the last time it came around, according to this book, was when they started the Hebrew calendar. That the Hebrew calendar starts when Nibiru appeared. Now, fast forward to Rome, Julius Caesar changed the calendar to the Julian calendar. They said this was the beginning of several calendar manipulations. They said there was more behind this, that Julius Caesar was a member of the Temple of Jupiter, and that it was descendants of Nibiru who wanted dominion over time. Now, time could descend to zero, and then after that, start over again and go on forever. And they say this happened because of something around that time. At this time was when higher dimensional beings, including Christ and Buddha, were able to incarnate on Earth. And they say this is why the Roman Empire took over time, changed spirituality to organized religion, and changed love to dependency. Because they say that the love and the frequency of Christ coming to Earth was so high that people would not be able to stay in the third dimension for long. However, these fourth dimensional gods, the Annunaki, needed to lock us into the third dimension by creating a frequential net around the planet that would enable them to have dominion over us in the third dimension, which is why they took over the church and replaced the power and knowledge of Christ and switching it to fear of death, disempowering women, forgetting the multidimensional self, and using it to control people. Messiah means message. Then she channels Anubis. Anubis, the ancient Egyptian god who resembles a dog person. Sirius is known as the dog star. That's why it's Sirius XM's logo, a dog with a star eye. So Anubis says this 0 point in time caused the manifestation of Christ to come to Earth. And as we know, Mary Magdalene in the Bible was Jesus's wife. And according to this, she was the priestess of the Temple of Isis of Jerusalem. And this story of Osiris from ancient Egypt being dismembered, it was apparently Christ who remembered by having children with Mary and allowing Christ to be in the DNA of humans. Now, while we're on the topic of Pleiadians and creation, let's see what the Pleiadians have to say about our creation story. Okay, so we're going to get this information from Bringers of the Dawn by Barbara Marciniak. Different Barbara from the last two videos. Just a coincidence, if there's any such thing as coincidences. According to the Pleiadians, humanity is an experiment. Humanity has been designed, as has everything else that exists within creation. They believe in a prime creator. They use the word prime creator to distinguish from all the other creator gods, meaning aliens, most likely. So they say that prime creator created extensions of himself and told them to go and create and bring everything back to him. These creator gods, with a small g, began to experiment with prime creator's energy. They also created a hierarchy to assist them in developing the universe. Some of these creator gods were master geneticists. A portion of these creator gods were from something called the family of light. And they had a vision to create this living library that would have all of the DNA from everywhere around the universe. So they helped develop Earth as a cosmic library of DNA. Now, after this living library of Earth was created, many millions of years after all these creator gods were creating stuff, this is how duality became. Because some of these creator gods were able to do whatever they want. And since this is a free will zone, they had the free will to come and take over Earth. And according to this book, that was the Anunnaki. They said this is why light is information and darkness is the lack of information, because they did not want the beings on Earth to know the truth about themselves or about their planet, keeping them uninformed and easier to control. They said that some of these creator gods manipulated our DNA again, after many times that we had already been manipulated, and that there was 12 strands of DNA, and they basically put a frequential ban on our bodies so that we would only be able to experience 2 strands of DNA. They want us to know that these creator gods that rule in other dimensions mostly create trauma, emotional trauma, to keep Earth at a certain frequency to nourish themselves. They say that these beings are part human and part reptilian, but because we don't want to instill any fear, so they call them the Lizzies. So coming up, we're going to finally talk about the reptilians. And they say that this control is not control by martial law. It's the psychological manipulation of consciousness through which reality is defined. That those within the reality aren't able to realize that anything outside of that reality exists. Okay, so more on fourth dimensional lizards controlling our reality coming up. Okay, so you guys know I've been stalling on making this video, but let's get right into it. Now, before we dive into this reptilian theory, I want to make it very clear. This theory gets connected to anti-Semitism. We're going to make it clear right now, that's not what we're talking about. So we're not going to go there. We're not going to engage that. And when you look into this theory, it's often associated with political leaders and the monarchy. And we haven't had any Jewish presidents, and the monarchy isn't either. If there's anything like that in the comments, you're going to get blocked. So let's get back to the concept of serpents, dragons, lizards, all being so deeply intertwined with creation throughout many different cultures. So first, let's start with the Anunnaki. Enki, Anu's son, is often depicted as being half serpent. And in majority of these cultures, the serpent or dragon is not seen as a negative thing like it is in Christianity. There's many instances in Chinese culture of dragons bringing wisdom, and even of emperors mixing with dragons. Stories of women becoming pregnant from dragons, and this shows up several times. Also stories of half-dragon people in Japanese culture and Vietnam. And it's very prominent in Armenian culture of kings mixing with dragons under several dynasties, the story of ancient Russian heroes, and even as recent as the 1400s in Serbia. It also comes up all throughout Native American cultures. It's depicted in art and also things like this serpent mound. There's Navajo legends about snake people. In fact, the Mayans worshipped a serpent god. So it's often depicted in Greek mythology as well. And what's interesting about this one, Hydra, is that Hercules, a boy who has a human mom and God for a dad, is the one to fight off this serpent. So Hercules, Jesus, the Nephilim, and hundreds of other stories tell the story of man fusing with gods. Now, it's said that these serpent beings, reptilians, dragons, originate in the Draco star system. And it said that these are the beings who mixed with the kings and queens, dating all the way back to the pharaohs. Is this what they mean by blue blood? According to the Pleiadians, these lizard gods manipulated our DNA to prevent us from accessing the truth of our reality. Was it the manipulation of our DNA that tells the true story of the Garden of Eden? Do all of us have reptilian DNA? When we look at how familiar we are in the embryo stages of life, is this why we have draconian rulers? And why is every president and member of the elite a descendant of Dracula? Have you been watching too much jkultra programming? Are you concerned that fourth dimensional lizards are using your anxiety and depression as food? Do you feel the apocalypse is on its way, but you're not worried because you'll be going to the fifth dimension? Do you miss your old timeline? And do you think that CERN took the Monopoly Man's monocle? Well, now you can show your support to jkultra programming with these conversation starter t-shirts. First up, we have our Time's Not Real tee. Now, you can use this t-shirt to magically detect people in your vicinity who are willing to talk about aliens and the time wars currently happening in other dimensions. Next up is the jkultra Never Smiling tee. Now, this t-shirt won't bring back your original timeline, but it might make you feel a little better about it. And our current bestseller before ever officially launching, our Earthshift Happily Now tee. It's been prophesized for centuries that the world will undergo a shift and a rapture-like scenario will go down. Wear this tee to let the universe know that you are ready for the shift and it better go smoothly. Because haven't we taken enough already? Any one of these shirts could be yours by going to the link in the bio. And remember, programs like this are brought to you by viewers like you. Because here at jkultra Programming, we've got so many community guideline violations that we couldn't monetize if we tried. And in honor of those violations, we've got something special for the ladies. Our limited edition Community Guidelines t-shirt. Because women who follow community guidelines rarely make history. And if you don't have any violations, I mean, what are you doing? So head on over to the link now and get yours before the world ends. Okay, I've been asked to answer this question many times. Is Earth a prison planet? What about the reincarnation trap? What about the don't go into the light thing? How if you go into the light, it's a trick and you just get sucked back to Earth into another baby's body and the soul just keeps recycling and recycling and recycling? Or what about, is Earth just a loosh farm? We're just cattle, food for fourth dimensional beings to feed on? Okay, here we go. This don't go into the light thing is a very common thing that comes up in the spiritual UFO conspiracy communities. Okay, I'll tell you right now, I don't believe that. So even if you're not a fan of Dolores Cannon, I mean, I don't know how, but okay. But Dolores Cannon, Dr. Michael Newton, Dr. Brian Weiss, Dr. Helen Wambach, and millions of people who've experienced near-death experiences all describe the same type of process. And at no point do you get sucked back into Earth and pop out of another baby. No. You go back to the other side, you review your life, and it'll be some time before you decide to come back here. And yes, you decide. Also, if you want to look at the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which guides monks through the death process, they describe something very similar too. Now, in the last parts, in this book, Pleiadian Agenda, she claims that there is a net that has been put around the planet by the Annunaki to prevent people from experiencing their multidimensional self. In Bringers of the Dawn, they claim that creator gods ruling in other dimensions will create emotional trauma to keep Earth at a certain frequency and to nourish themselves. And this is where we get into the declassified CIA documents from the gateway process. So while remote viewing, some people saw fourth dimensional reptilian humanoids that could not be perceived with their third dimensional eyes, but were actually all around us. And according to Robert Monroe of the Monroe Institute, many of his subjects witnessed this, that they were nefarious, that they've enslaved humanity for millennia, that they feed off of our life force. He called it loosh being low vibrational energy, and that they view Earth as their own farm, where we are the cattle. They feed on our fear, hatred, anxiety, anger, and depression, that they see themselves as superior and the rulers of mankind. And remember what we're not going to do. Feed into fear, because this whole theory is fear-based, and their food is fear. I didn't even want to address it, but it kept coming up in the comments. And the important thing here is the emotional trauma. So it's not that you're going to get sucked back to Earth and that you can never leave. The thing is, these fourth dimensional beings are masters of our matrix and masters of karma. So they understand exactly how to make you incarnate again by unhealed trauma, which is why everything we talk about in the Earthshift series is so important, because you need to heal so you don't keep incarnating. Well, I know everyone's like, well, Jen, do you believe in it? And the answer is, hey guys, welcome back. So we're pretty deep into this alien series, but there's so much further to go. So how about we do a little mid-series recap? Okay, so we started off this series talking about the Galactic Federation, which is a collective of beings from all over this galaxy and nearby galaxies who all have the common goal of furthering the plan of the one infinite creator. Then we discussed a treaty that was signed by Dwight D. Eisenhower, where he had to decide whether he wanted to work with service to self aliens who would exchange technology and weapons for abductions, or another group of aliens who were communicating with the government at that time, only agreed to help us if we evolved spiritually. And we established that there's many different races of aliens. So far, we've discussed three main types. A gray species, who claims to be from Orion, although it seems to line up with a lot of information about grays that are from Zeta Reticuli. We're going to be getting into that more coming up in this series. Then we also discussed the Pleiadians, which are said to be a humanoid species, although there's many stars in that cluster, and they could be several types of species. And we see the Pleiades show up on ancient tablets all around the world. And the other main species that we've discussed is a reptilian species from the Draco constellation. Now, this is not the only type of reptilian species and not the only origin. This is just the specific one that continues to come up in our possible story of our creation. We also discussed the Annunaki, who appear to be these tall, bearded men. Could this be the reason why God is often depicted as a man with a long beard, as well as many other gods throughout history? But we've had some other places come up, such as Arcturus, yes, in the Bible. So we'll be getting into Arcturians, who are often described as having blue skin. Could this be the star origin? of the blue-skinned deities in Vedic tradition. When discussing ancient Egypt, Syrians came up several times. Coming up, we're going to get more into that, which could be a possible explanation for Anubis, the dog god of ancient Egypt. We're also going to be discussing Lyrans and Vegans and the legends of a galactic war that might have originated in that star system, which was said to involve draconians. Is it possible feelings we have about reptilians are possibly remnants from an ancient galactic war that is still imprinted into our DNA but hasn't been healed, which is why some people might believe it's still going on today? We'll also be talking about our galactic neighbors in the Andromedan galaxy. Are all of these different beings basically toxic parents to humans that we just need to heal from? Stay tuned. So now we're at the part of the series that we're going to start getting into the rest of the alien races. But first, check out the awesome jkultra shirt. Hello. Meet the Arcturians. Arcturus is one of the brightest stars in the sky. Here's our sun in comparison. It's part of the Boötes constellation. Yeah, I thought it was Boots too. These beings are often considered the mothers of the human race. What's interesting, Edgar Cayce said that Arcturians were the highest civilization in our galaxy. According to Edgar Cayce, these were fifth dimensional beings, although it's said that they live in many different dimensions, since there's so many planets revolving around this giant star. According to Matthias De Stefano, host of the Gaia Show Initiation, this is going to be coming from Season 2, Episode 2, he claims that Arcturians have an elongated head, almond-shaped eyes, and some of them have blue skin. He says the reason that their skin is blue is that in some of the planets around the Arcturus star, there's no oxygen. What's interesting, he also says that they are physical beings and that they are very close to humans and were able to physically reproduce with humans. Once again, brings us back to that term, blue blood. Blue blood meaning nobility, aristocrats, the elite, people who didn't mix with the commoners. And as we know, many ancient cultures depicted their gods as having blue skin, especially Shiva and Vishnu. We also see it in ancient Japan, Bali, with the Aztecs, and remnants of it in ancient Egypt. Arcturus shows up twice in the Bible, but it's always mentioned with Orion and the Pleiades. Once again, and this time with his sons. And in the Aboriginal tribes of Australia, they credit Arcturus with helping them discover the larva of a wood ant, which is the main part of their diet. We also have many instances of Arcturus coming up in ancient civilizations, linking it to us understanding the weather more, which again brings us back to the Book of Enoch, where some of these watchers who mated with human women and created a hybrid race also taught us about the weather. So back to what Matthias De Stefano says. He says that Arcturians, because they had physical bodies, worked with Pleiadians, who only had light bodies, to come together to combine the physical and the spiritual to create the human race. He said the Pleiadians wanted to bring heaven to earth. Arcturians wanted to bring earth to heaven by infusing the DNA and the physical with the spiritual teachings. He also said something that I think doesn't get talked about in the ET conversation. He said that on the physical planets around Arcturus, there are many different skin colors. He said Pleiadians can also appear in many shades, but it's the energy of their vibration because they don't have physical skin. Today, we're going to talk about where it all began. Well, where the human race began. The constellation of Lyra. Vega is the brightest star in the Lyra constellation. It's also one of the brightest stars in the sky. Okay, so some of this information is going to be coming from Gaia TV, from the show Open Minds, and the guest is Debbie Solaris. So Debbie is a galactic historian. She gets this information from the Galactic Akashic Records, but it does match up with many other sources that I've seen. Okay, so the Lyra constellation is considered the starting off point of physical form in our galaxy and also the origin of the humanoid species. And this information lines up with the book by Lisa Royal Holt, which gets deeper into the human galactic heritage. We're going to combine the different sources so that we have linear information. Okay, so before the creation of the humanoid race, it said that there was a race of lion people who completed all their levels of ascension in another universe. After completion, they were given the opportunity to come to our galaxy and explore a different type of existence through physical form. So they were given a planet in the Lyran system. It's said that this planet is called Avion. But as far as modern astronomy goes, we're not really sure exactly which planet this was in the system. Over time, these cat people genetically modified themselves to become more humanoid. Millions of years later, the constellation of Lyra was inhabited by many different types of humanoids. It said that some of these were lighter in complexion and were more of a father god mentality and more technologically driven, and some of these were darker in complexion and were more of a mother god mentality and more spiritually advanced. But in general, the constellation was living in harmony. And this basically made them sitting ducks to their galactic neighbors in the Draco star system, which is known for its reptilian beings. It's a warring, conquering race of aliens. As we know, the Draconians were extremely advanced technologically. So the Draconians offered to make a deal with the Lyrans, offering them technology, offering them weapons, in exchange for resources and other things. But there was deception behind it, and this eventually led to the Lyran Wars. And the Lyran Wars is what led to the humanoid race being spread out throughout our galaxy. This is from Ascension Glossary, by the way, not Wikipedia, clearly. It's believed that the people from Vega fled to the Sirius star system and Orion. A planet called Avalon fled to the Pleiades and became the ancestors of the Pleiadians. Beings from the planet Avion, which was the royal house of the Lyrans, fled to Sirius, Andromeda, and the Pleiades. This led to what then was considered the Orion Wars. Orion is a melting pot of our galaxy. Coming up, we're going to talk about the portal in the belt. Are Lyrans the inspiration for the feline gods in ancient Egypt? Okay, so we left off with the war in Lyra, moving to the constellation of Orion. This information is coming from the prism of Lyra. As many alien races moved to Orion, it became a war of polarity between negative and positive. So the negative side believed in service to self, and the positive side believed in service to others. However, after several generations, both sides lost sight of what they were actually fighting for. So the negative side, which believed in service to self, they believed that service to self would serve the whole. Forgetting that service to self was denying the whole by the way that they chose to carry out this philosophy. This translated to the need for domination. And the positive side also lost sight of their original philosophy. They believed that they needed to become subservient at the expense of their self. The positive side felt that to support the whole, they must serve the whole and relinquish the self, which created a victim mentality, both of which were playing into the part of the other. The dominating side had a victim, and the victim had someone to victimize them. This lines up with the information in the Law of One, which focuses on the same concept of either service to self or service to others. And they tell a similar story of galactic history, where the Confederation, which Ra claims to be a part of, serves the one infinite creator and believes in service to others. He talks about the Orion group, which would be the negative polarity because its philosophy is service to self. According to Matthias De Stefano on Gaia TV, the show Initiation, Season 1, Episode 11, and many other sources. The Belt of Orion is the largest portal in our galaxy. This portal of Orion is a portal of time and space that is able to get information from other dimensions and allow beings to pass through multiple dimensions. So this war in Orion was also for control of this portal. And this portal has 4 pillars around it as any temple would, the way that a pyramid would have 4 corners. It's believed that the pyramids of Giza are directly connected to the 3 stars in Orion's belt, with the largest pointing directly to the portal in the center. One of the pillars were to be disrupted, it could change the frequency of the portal. Negative groups were using the portal to manipulate time and space and create new realities, manipulate matrices. 600 light years away from Earth is Betelgeuse. Now, Betelgeuse might be a ghost, and I'm not exactly joking. Since Betelgeuse is 600 light years away, anything that happens there would take 600 years for us to see. And it's set to explode soon. It went from being the 9th brightest star in the sky to the 23rd brightest star in the sky. It's believed this led Sirians and Arcturians to begin to seed Earth, to create the living library of Earth. So now that we're talking about Orion, let's talk about parts 6, 7, and 8 of this series. The Greys that Tim was communicating with said they were from Orion. However, it's widely accepted that grays come from Zeta Reticuli, a binary star system that's much closer to Earth, only 39 light years away. This is widely accepted in the UFO community because of the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill and how they were able to produce an accurate star map based on what these grays showed them. Okay, so this comes from the Ashayana Dean book, Voyagers Volume 1. She confirms that they are coming from the Orion star system, but they are often considered to come from Zeta Reticuli because they are part of a subspecies of another race that started there. She says that they started interacting with Earth around World War I. By World War II, they established covert treaties with both the Axis and the Allies. She says by the 1980s, they joined forces with their ancient adversaries, the Dracos, a reptilian hybrid race, who can also be traced back to the Orion star system. Now this lines up with Cosmic Disclosure again, Season 12, Episode 11, called Galactic Threats. In this episode, Randy Kramer is talking about some of the bad actors out there in space. He says there's generally a 95-5 rule. 95% are benevolent, 5% are not. He says there's many different types of gray. He said this is because they work with many different star systems, which also lines up with what Tim said in another episode. He said that they have an authoritarian system where very few at the top will control the entirety of their species. He says that the small grays that we typically see in abduction is the scientist caste or the piloting caste. He says that the taller grays are from a warrior caste, which also lines up with what Tim was saying. He says he doesn't know of any that are actually gray. They could be off-white, very dark purple, copper reddish brown, more earthy brown, beige, and even dark green. He says that all of these different species can intermingle, but that they typically won't because of genetic manipulation they're not able to produce naturally, which is why they are currently here on Earth creating a hybrid species, which also lines up with what Tim was saying and what Dolores Cannon said in Keepers of the Garden, as well as the 3 Waves of Volunteers and the New Earth book, that they need to create this hybrid race with humans because their species is going to cease to exist in the near future, that they've evolved so far away from their soul that they will die out with the evolution of the universe. Now, according to the Orion Council of Light, you can see this on Gaia TV, humans have no Zeta DNA directly, but our extraterrestrial ancestors who helped seed the human race do have some Zeta DNA in them. Therefore, this hybrid program is for them to retrieve some of the original DNA of the Zeta ancestors. Throughout this series, everything kind of seems to be coming back to Sirius, which is the brightest star in the sky, often called the dog star, and associated with Anubis, the dog god of ancient Egypt. It's a part of the constellation Canis Major, as in canine, and means greater dog. And it's interesting how civilizations all over who had seemingly no connection to each other all had similar names for it. In Chinese astrology called the celestial wolf, Native American cultures throughout North America called it dogface or wolf star, coyote star, or moon dog. Also the term dog day, which refers to the hottest days of the summer, is linked to the rising of Sirius in the sky. But the most fascinating is the doggone tribe of Mali. In the 1930s, French anthropologists traveled to Mali, and according to the elders, beings came from this star to help teach man. Some would say, of course, they had a story about the brightest star in the sky. The tribe also knew of Sirius B, which was not visible to the naked eye and wasn't discovered until the mid-1800s. Now, what's interesting, the tribe described it as a tiny star, but they said it was one of the heaviest stars. How could they have known that Sirius B is a white dwarf star, referring to its density? What's crazy is they also knew of Sirius C. And they said that it let off rays of light similar to the sun. It wasn't until 1994 that astronomers confirmed this was true. It's often speculated that Sirius, the brightest star, may have actually been the Star of Bethlehem, and that the 3 kings was actually the 3 stars of Orion's belt, which would follow Sirius from the east. Now let's get back to the information in the Prism of Lyra and take a look at this chart, which could help us better understand the order in which things happen. So as we remember, the experience of physical life began in Lyra. A similar looking but opposite philosophy developed in Vega, which led to the Wars of Lyra. The beings of Lyra and Vega moved to other star systems, settling around the star of Sirius. Different parts in Sirius started to experience the same problems. The battle between physical and non-physical, technological and spiritual, and mother god mentality and father god mentality, which again forced these beings to migrate to other places, including Orion. Now, some of the physical Sirius beings forgot their true origin, the same way that humans in the physical forget our origin. These became the negative beings of Sirius. These positive and negative polarities, service to self or service to others, led to all the different beings that were involved in these wars to contribute their DNA to the living library of Earth so that it would be preserved no matter what happened. And this explains why we have millions of different species here and such diversity of life. And we're seeing that every species, including ours, has positive and negative. Don't mind me just in the Andromeda galaxy with my time's not real jkultra tea. Make sure you get yours before the galaxies collide. Yeah, about that. We're on a collision course with the Andromeda galaxy. It's approaching at over 100 kilometers per second. They've estimated that this will happen in less than 4 billion years, sometime before then. And right before it happens, it's going to be the most amazing sight anyone on Earth has ever seen. Unfortunately, they're going to miss the finale. And then by 6 billion years, they speculate that the black hole at the center of both galaxies will eventually meet, and could look something like this after. Theoretically, of course. So since this is our neighboring galaxy with at least 1 trillion stars, they must have all different forms of life. Okay, so let's take a look at Alex Collier, most well-known Andromedan contactee. This information is going to be coming from his seminars recorded in 1996. You can get it here on this YouTube channel. Okay, so let's go over some of the highlights of the information that he said came from the Andromedans. Okay, so he said he was taken on a craft. It was 900 feet wide. It had 24 levels. While he was on the ship, he had to wear some type of belt, type of technology that would keep his physicality intact. He says there's an internal sun on the ship. In the center, there's a 21 mile by 21 mile lush park of trees and plant life. These parks were also the schools. He says they live about 1,000 years and they spend 120 years in what would be their school equivalent. He says he was there for 3 months. When he got back, only 18 minutes had passed in our time. So when he went to that park where all the children learn, he said all the children would move away from him. And it hurt his feelings. Clearly, wouldn't feel good to have alien babies be scared of you. The Andromedans that he communicates with told him it's not you. It's just that we've been teaching them about your race. So they also give a lot of information about galactic history. So the Andromedans say that we have DNA from 22 different alien species, one of which being them. He says that benevolent alien species appreciate the power that humans have, but malevolent ETs considers us to be more like animals. Of course, these service to self beings don't want to see us surpass them. And of course, people in the audience ask about the Dracos. And he says, according to the Andromedans, someone dropped the Alpha Draconi Reptilians here. They believe from another universe. And they were under the impression that they were here to command and that our galaxy was theirs to conquer. And he tells a similar story of how these Draconians saw humanoid civilization in Lyra. They were flourishing with agriculture, so they took it. Oh, and they say that our universe is a 21 trillion year old hologram. Just like theirs is. That 900-foot ship that they live on is also a hologram, but it's created with technology. They say humans are very special because we can create a hologram with our minds. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off. Andromedans were telling us about our universe being a hologram, that our world is a hologram, the same way that their ship is a hologram. Okay, so they say our universe is 11 levels. That what's happening with humans right now on Earth in the 3rd dimension is going to unlock the 12th level and change the entire system. Another reason why malevolent species are trying to prevent ascension. Okay, so when I said that they have to manifest their reality with technology, but that we don't, he says it's because they took the DNA from a very stable, non-terrestrial humanoid species and mixed it with a primate. And the primates give us extreme emotion that other races throughout the galaxy are not able to experience, including the Andromedans, or to the extreme of the Greys, where they've basically lost touch with all of their emotions. Okay, so this primate, intense, extreme emotion, and the consciousness of being able to manifest things into a reality gives humans the apparently rare ability to be able to create things within the hologram without the use of any technology, just by their thoughts. words, emotions, and actions. You know, you remember it from the Earthshift series. Go back and watch it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then especially go back and watch the Earthshift series on my page. Go right here to the Earthshift. Everything perfectly in order for you. We already know how to create reality. We just have to remember. Okay, so when the Andromedans were talking about our power of manifesting and creating things within the hologram, they told him, humans on Earth don't realize how powerful we are. They said it's amazing that when we leave our house, it doesn't disintegrate. And that made me think of something. Okay, so this woman, Georgia Jean, she channels the circle of light. You can see this on Interviews with Extra Dimensionals, Season 2, Episode 12 on Gaia TV. You are not consciously thinking all the time. Not saying, hey cells, join together and make these bones. We are primarily an unconscious creation, meaning our physical bodies are existing within this hologram without our conscious effort. But if you want to learn how to bend the matrix per se, you must travel more deeply into what you are creating in the unconscious. Okay, here's the good stuff. There's 2 states that form comes into manifestation. One is manifestation, one is knowingness. The only thing that exists is what you are perceiving right now. But you know there's a road down there. So when you know in neutral factor that there is a road down there, it will become manifest. When you're trying to manifest, first thing you have to ask, is it manifest? Is it manifest? What does that mean? Is it manifested into reality? Or am I in such a knowingness that I know it's down the street? Am I certain that there's a kitchen right there? That when I walk there, a kitchen will be there? And most people have manifested their houses. They are certain that when they go to the bathroom's going to be there. You see what they were saying about our manifestation power? That even our knowingness is unconsciously manifesting and creating within the hologram. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about the worst alien species of them all. Terrans. Terrans, also known as Earthlings, living on Earth, like on the surface. The people who live inside aren't Terrans. We'll get to that. Terrans are primarily human, the most abundant and widespread species of the primates on Earth. And they do have some very advanced tools. And surprisingly, the word human also comes from humane, to mean kind, gentle, polite, civilized. Okay. And of course, like all the alien species, some lean a little too far in service to self, while others lean a little too far in service to others. Okay, so these Terrans, they might be on the bottom of the dimension totem pole, like 3rd dimension, especially when 1st and 2nd is like rocks and plants. But we have the greatest potential. I mean, they, Terrans. And their planet, Earth, also has like the greatest potential because it's a living library. We're also getting information from Bringers of the Dawn, both by Barbara Marciniak, channeled from Pleiadians. Ambassadors through time. The Pleiadians say their ancestors came from another universe that achieved completion, and we're working with a planet that is coming to completion. And what happens on Earth will affect the entire universe. The words they select are codes that are stored deep in our body. Your bodies are waiting for the questions to be posed so that you can resonate with the answers inside of yourselves, so that the cellular memories within your body can begin to remember what you already know. Earth was designed to be an intergalactic exchange center of information. It was an incredible plan. Earth was a beautiful place, located on the fringe of one of the galactic systems, and easily reached from other galaxies. It was close to so many portals, the highways that exist for energies to travel through space. Some of the creator gods were master geneticists, and many sentient civilizations gave their DNA to have a representation of their coding upon this planet. Played with varieties of DNA to make Earth into an exchange center of information, a light center, a living library. The plan for Earth was a grand one. Then the library kind of got hijacked because free will. And then they kind of get into the emotions are a source of food. And that it's hard for us to understand that because we eat food differently. But guess who is removing that food source? You are, as a member of the family of light. You are renegades. You are system busters. Here to conquer your own fears and show the rest of the planet that there is no reason to fear anything. You love to go in and cause trouble. You are famous. You're a branch of the family of light. You are famous for going into the systems of reality and altering their frequency, thus bringing information. Humans were designed to be the keys of the living library. The only way to access the information would be to go through the humans. If you want more living library, part 9 of the Earthshift series, and 10 too. And as we're coming to the end of this series, You guys know I'm not going to do that to you. Leave you hanging on what happened in the rest of this chapter. From Keepers of the Garden by Dolores Cannon. You may or may not have noticed, this series has 2 part 12s. It was completely accidental. I didn't mean to do the whole no 13th floor thing. That's where they give us information about creation, our DNA, aliens, God. And the second part 12 is more about the seeding. If you remember, the past life he went to was an Andromedan. I wanted to give you a little more from that chapter. Okay, so when you go back and watch those parts, there's a lot of questions about creation, specifically the seeding. What did the people look like? Who seeded us? And throughout this whole book, Dolores is struggling with questions to ask because she spends so many hours doing this over the course of years with the same person, Phil, who's the subject in this book, that she starts having other people come to the session, almost like a small audience of people that she knows so that they could ask questions. So this whole thing about creation, if aliens believe in God, all the stuff we talked about in the other videos, this is all happening in front of a small audience. So they keep running into this. She asks about some of the beings. We will not answer that question at this time because the reasons we stated earlier. She says, will you tell me in a private session? This we will not say. We will speak of it no further. Seems there was many forbidden topics in this session. Dolores wants to know, where did the seeds come from? The seeds that seeded Earth. Where are we from? She wants to know if it was natural or in a laboratory. They said there was a stock of races which had been tried and proven and were determined to be suitable for this planet. There was many choices to be made, for had the decision be made differently, you would not look quite like now. You would be most amused to see what you could have looked like. Much laughter in the room. So the aliens that are like channeling through him start cracking everyone up. Dolores asks if it's like cloning. We will not speak of this. Dolores is like, I just want to know if animals or humans came first. Humans are animals. You have a dual nature, that of light and that of dark, or that of ethereal and that of material. We are trying to consensus how to answer this, a way that the forbidden zone is not crossed, and yet you are still given an answer that you can comprehend. So it's like a collective being channeled, and they have to decide amongst themselves what is appropriate to say. A gradual and attentive pruning of an established stock, which was nurtured and cared for to ensure the outcome. Occasionally, an intruder from outside, he paused as though listening. And we will not speak of this any further, for it is approaching those boundaries. So they keep running into this. We will not speak of it at this time. So Dolores is like, okay, I'm going to hold you to it. Everyone laughs. They say, we will not forget. Dolores says, I won't forget. I have a memory that's miles long. They say, we have one which is millennia long. Then Dolores is like, are you playing games with us? The mood of the forces immediately sobered. We are on a mission that has no humor to it. We will not bring up the subject of seriousness again. It was as distasteful to us to deliver as it is for you to receive. Then I really felt like I had been balled out. The mission. Hey guys, welcome back. Just chilling in my jkultra tee. A great gift for any woman in your life, because women who follow community guidelines rarely make history. Speaking of history, so around World War II, when UFO sightings started to really kick off. You remember from the beginning of the series, the Battle of LA, the Foo Fighters, this mass sighting in 1952 that looked like they were having an alien party at the Capitol. And after World War II, after this alleged treaty, it seems like the official reports of UFOs died down for a bit. That is until recently. So recent that coming up on Tuesday, Congress is going to hold their first meeting on UFOs in 50 years. Did we manifest that? Was that us? Now this brings us to Dolores Cannon. You can also get this information on YouTube. 3 Waves of Volunteers. Dolores Cannon. She's got a ton of seminars. Also check out my video on it. It's part 18 of the Earthshift series. I'm going to link it below in the caption. But things got so horrible in World War II. Humans almost destroyed the planet using technology that could have negative effects throughout the entire universe. And this called on to the higher councils in the spirit realm to try to come up with a plan of how to help Earth. So they put out a call to beings that lived on all different planets and said Earth needs help. And souls from everywhere decided to incarnate as humans on Earth to help shift the planet. And the first wave started after World War I. And it was the smallest group. Some people born in the 40s, 50s, and 60s who became the way showers of a lot of the information that's out now. The second wave was a few in the 70s, a lot in the 80s, and a little in the 90s. Those are the second wave volunteers. They're kind of the louder system busters. And then the third wave is the Crystal Children. From the 90s onward, the space that has been laid for the people before them allows them to be in a way that they can just be themselves, and them just being themselves is enough to change a planet. Okay, so Destiny of Soul by Dr. Michael Newton, the sequel of Journey of Souls. Dr. Newton was very skeptical of things, and he talks about the hybrid soul. These hybrid souls are people who lived on alien planets before incarnating on Earth. And he says people who feel like they want to go home should be taken seriously because some of them are truly not from Earth. And many people have looked into this phenomenon. Here are Windrider, the Indigo Children. Astrologers say you can see the influx of Indigo Children in astrology. And many of these volunteers are starseeds, meaning they originate from different stars. Now, Greg Braden, author of The Divine Matrix, says this ascension process of Earth will go in 3 waves. The first is in the mind, the idea of unity. The second wave is in the heart. And in the third wave, we evolve past polarity. So if you were watching this series and for no reason you started tearing up because you felt like you might have been from one of these places, maybe you are. Volunteers need to understand their own feelings of not wanting to be here on Earth are creating the power blocks that prevent them from what they need to do here. I was watching them and they needed help. I volunteered. We'd been watching them a long time. They came here to transform Earth from the inside. And now let's take a look at our runners-up, the other alien races that didn't quite make it into this series. So first runner-up is my favorite, the Insectoids, specifically mantis beings. So these mantis beings are a phenomenon in the abduction community. People often say that when they are being abducted by small grays, in the distance they can see these 7-foot-tall mantis beings who appear to be overseeing the process. This also shows up in Keepers of the Garden. Phil is recalling one of his abductions, and there's a man-sized praying mantis there, and about these mantis beings harvesting eggs from women. He also brings up how this is a phenomenon in Whitley Strieber's Communion, based on true abduction stories. Then we have some of the earliest episodes of Cosmic Disclosure. When Emery wasn't the host, he was still a guest. This one called E.T. Coworkers, where he says ant and mantis people work in these underground facilities, and that being around them could cause miraculous healings. David Wilcock is like, okay, wait, what? That would be extremely frightening. Okay, there's a lot of sources that say there's indigenous ant people who live in the Pacific Southwest area of the country. Underground, of course, like any ant would. He says these ant people, some are segmented and some are non-segmented bodies, and that their face is their most prominent feature. He asks about the mantids that are in the Antarctica base. Emery says they have reflective skin and that their exoskeleton is 3 inches thick. They have no muscular structure except to close their eyes and their mouth. Then he talks about a time that a bunch had been brought to the facility at Los Alamos where he worked, and they had been killed by chemicals. He said that some of the ETs that worked at the facility were so sad about what happened. It was the first time he ever felt sorrow from an ET, and then he gets choked up about it. Okay, we have so much coming up. Aquafarians, space station on Mars, and highlights from a book that was allegedly leaked from the KGB, listing all the alien races that the Russian government was aware of. But first... Hi, and welcome back to the first annual jkultra Telethon. I'm Jennifer Carmody, and you might recognize me from some of your favorite TikTok programming, like Apocalyptic Prophecies, The Earth Shift. And as we get to the end of this alien series finally, if you guys are liking what you're seeing and you want to support me, I will be accepting tips. jkultra on Venmo. Don't forget the underscore. And for the more secretive among you, official jkultra on Cashapp, because somebody named Jake had already taken the username. So you'll know it's me by the Mandela Effect t-shirt. And remember, no amount is too small. And there's so many reasons to tip. Okay, we're back. I need a quick message from our sponsor. You. Thanks. Okay, so remember, Emery was about to cry. 10 seasons later, Emery asks what happened to the ant people and says the incident happened in Crestone, Colorado. He says the ant species that got poisoned lived in these mountains, but they were evicted. Some of them have survived and live in Blanca Peak. Okay, so before we get into the Alien Races KGB book, let's talk about the Jupiter Space Station. Coming from Season 10, Episode 5 of Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia TV, we have Randy Kramer. There is a neutral meeting place orbiting Jupiter. The host is like, why Jupiter? Because it's our solar system's biggest planet, of course. It's easy to see. Okay, so since it's a neutral meeting place, he has seen many different species there. And the part that I find most interesting is that he says sometimes your brain can't process what it's seeing, that it just projects a different image. He said he saw the Scarecrow from Wizard of Oz. And his colonel said, yeah, sometimes I see Muhammad Ali or my aunt. When your brain can't figure something out, it'll just pull something out and project it. He says when you first get to the station, you need to take 15 to 20 minutes for your brain to even adjust. He said you basically sit there and take a quick look around, and then you look at the floor and give your brain a chance to fill things in because it's so outside of our reality. He says you stare at the floor until your head stops hurting and then do it again. Okay, so this KGB book has been in the depths of the internet for a long time. Allegedly was found by this guy. It was in his father's stuff, who was believed to be a former KGB agent. Some of the highlights: Alpha Draconians, the Anakim. These were said to be the ancient giants. Andromedans. It says their council is above all of the other extraterrestrials in our galaxy. The Annunaki. That it's basically Nimrod, and he's gone by all these different names. The beings living in Antarctica, where German Yahtzee, reptilian humanoid beings live and do evil experiments. The Antares, from the planet Sirius A, and are the ones who provided the technology for the Montauk project. Bootians, close to Arcturus but completely different species. They are malevolent and a part of the Orion group. The Blues, with translucent skin and almond-shaped eyes. Most of the information we have about them comes from the Hopi tribe and Robert Morningsky. Buttas. These are basically an interdimensional demon. Feline species, one of our primary races in the universe, originally from Lyra. Invisibles, species that we can't quite put our finger on. Iguanoids. These are iguana humanoids, often wearing cloaks, and are considered the priest class of the Reptilians. The Tall Whites. These are some of the original gray human hybrids. This is also the species of the Men in Black, and can project themselves to look perfectly like a human. Sirians. These are one of the younger star races, and has features of dog, cat, and reptilian. Now for some of the inner Earth races. The Telosians. These are the Lemurian descendants that during the Great Flood went underground, located in Mount Shasta. There are many different species within the Agarthan network. So let's bring it back to our solar system. One thing that comes up a lot is the Venusians, the beings who lived on Venus, some of which were said to be named the Hathors. They were said to be some of the original teachers of Earth. It's also said there's a German breakaway civilization living on Mars. Oh, and according to the Andromedans, the face on Mars is Enki's tomb. And as we come to the end of this series, it's time for the big question. If it's proven that aliens are real and they're here now, my concern is all the people who keep calling them demons and fallen angels, because that's going to be really scary for you if they were to be here. Which is part of the reason why I wanted to make this series, because it's a possibility that this could happen in our lifetime, and I don't want you ruining everything with your fear. Let's take a look at AD, After Disclosure. Also, I really like this place for me. I can't believe I haven't tried this before. I like this spot a lot. So this book is really interesting. It goes through every possible scenario that could happen in Alien Disclosure. It's called AD because it's going to be an event that changes everything forever. And they go through every detail of what could happen on day one. Now, what I find really interesting, they speculate that if it was a controlled disclosure, which is most likely, the president would announce it on a Friday afternoon after the stock market has closed. It goes through all different scenarios and explores how different people will act. He says that religious groups who have called them demons will probably handle the information better than some skeptics. He said there's going to be lots of people who never explored the idea, and it's going to be a lot to handle for one day. It also speculates that they will probably officially close all businesses for at least 3 days, including all banks, to prevent people from pulling all of their money out. And in this chapter, the new age of Aquarius and how it affects us on a social level. How it's going to cause a lot of distrust in the government, in people who previously didn't. He says that some conspiracy people will think that even disclosure is a cover-up, and that you can't blame them after lying about it for all these years. It weaves it into consumerism and entertainment. Things like the new Honda Andromeda or the Toyota Universe. How education will change, politics, and history itself. This part right here is real interesting. The others, the aliens, will simply want to be a part of the Great Shift. People will come forward, Some who've been abducted, some will be telling the truth, some will be mistaken, and others will simply be piling on a new version of stolen valor. And of course, the revolution will be televised. It says there'll be new celebrities from the alien community. B and C list celebrities will step forward to raise the public's awareness. How alien movies will no longer be about invasions. And how healthcare will change with new alien technology. And possibly some people coming forward who've been getting experimented on by aliens for a long time. It says many experts and scholars will lose their positions because it will no longer be relevant. And what if these events were true? Dwight Eisenhower making a treaty with aliens. JFK telling Marilyn Monroe about UFOs right before she died. And what if it's true that President Nixon really took Jackie Gleason to see alien bodies? I mean, he did build a house that looked like a UFO. Coming up next, not everyone on Earth is going to experience aliens. Some people have made a decision not to. And by free will, they won't. But they're not on this timeline right now. Because everyone watching will be on the timeline where UFOs and foreign species will be a thing. Stay tuned. Okay, so we left off with everyone watching this is going to be on the timeline that exopolitics happened. Unfortunately, we're not on the timeline that the Mona Lisa was not smiling. But you could still get your jkultra never smiling tea. Look, they're trying to take her back. They're trying to take her back. Get yours before the non-smiling Mona Lisa gets sucked back into her original timeline. Not everyone on Earth will experience aliens. There are people who have made the decision, and by their free will, they will not. But they are not on this timeline right now. Okay, so not on our timeline right now. What exactly did he mean by that? Also, great question. How will this shift take place? You have some people who will move into a different frequential timeline and new world. There's a number of different possibilities. I will reduce it to 3. Those people who have decided to not enter a universe where exopolitics is a thing. Exopolitics meaning extraterrestrials. The people who on a soul level decided they didn't want anything to do with exopolitics have left the planet about 4 or 5 years ago. Now this is where it gets crazy. They could still appear in your life as some version of themselves.
The observer version of them is in a different timeline. That some people in your life have made a drastic change that might be indicator for that person to have shifted his or her observatory point to another timeline.
Could be an indicator that the person has shifted their observatory timeline. It says there is already a more harmonious timeline.
It's a timeline where those main player characters or CUs, consciousness units, or people, whatever you want to call them, they have decided.
Hold up. The main player characters or CUs, consciousness units, or people, whatever you want to call them. Is Tim an alien? Nice. This comes back to Marina Jacobi. This is your hologram. That's your consciousness. This right here is the blueprint that you're creating of the world. And that person is in your world, but in their hologram, they could be experiencing a different reality. So I want to leave you guys with some closing statements about this incredible, amazing journey we just took through the cosmos. And it all comes back to one major theme. There's so much information about different types of aliens, how some might be bad and some might be good and some are in the gray area. But when you look closer, you see that this polarity is reflected in each of these alien races, which led to cosmic wars that have been going on for millions of years. So some people believe that Orion is a reflection of us, and the similarities between our physical body structure and the shape of Orion can give us some insight to the war that is happening within each and every one of us. We see these same polarities everywhere in our society. It seems like every aspect of our identities is divided into 2 parts. But us feeding into these polarizing identities, is it just history repeating itself? Galactic history? And if Earth was created to be a living library and humans were given all of the galactic information held within our DNA, then if we are able to overcome polarity and unify within our own beliefs, then maybe we can overcome divisiveness in our society and world and the worlds beyond the entire universe. You might remember this cute little guy from Men in Black.
Prevent war, the galaxy is on Orion's belt.
To prevent war, the galaxy is on Orion's belt. And as we went over in this series, there's a portal in the center of Orion's belt that 2 opposing forces were fighting for control of. And this comes back to the law of one. And it gives us more clarity on good versus evil. That there really is no good and evil. It could be broken down to service to self or service to others. And it says that you only need to be 51% in service to others in order to be on the higher polarity of light. So oftentimes we're told that the reptilians are the bad guys. But I want to share a story from Convoluted Universe Book 2 by Dolores Cannon. There's a woman who, under hypnosis, finds out she's a reptilian. That basically her human form is an illusion because she's actually a reptilian. And she had no idea. Lived her life completely normal. In all of Dolores's work, she pretty much never brought up reptilians. This is one of the only times. I don't want to offend you, but some people have the impression that reptilians are negative. The reptilian woman responds, that is because there are so many who are still negative. You must understand that in everything there is balance. There is balance everywhere. You will find on your Earth plane, there is more duality than in other places. So even the reptilians within our Earth plane also carry that duality energy. But negative energy is only misguided, forgotten energy of the true self. Positive and negative is ingrained in our atomic structure, yet the atom is balanced. Good morning, guys. As you know, we had a historical day today. Congress held its first meeting about UFOs in 50 years, and I'll be giving you my breakdown.
More than 50 years ago, the U.S. government ended Project Blue Book, an effort to catalog and understand sightings of objects in the air that could not otherwise be explained.
Okay, so Mr. Carson goes on to say that the culture around UAPs has changed, that anyone who reports them will be treated as witnesses. Project Blue Book ended 50 years ago. In 2017, there was another organization, and this will be the third version of it. Then Ronald Moultrie, who's going to be one of the faces of this new organization, says this is a matter of national safety and that pilots must be able to report these things without a stigma. He also suggests that these things could be Russia or China. I'd also like to note that this is the public version, that after this meeting, they go to lunch, and at noon, they will continue this in a closed hearing. So it appears the name of this force is called AIMSOG, but that is likely to change. So Mr. Scott Bray is also going to be publicly speaking about this program, which wants to change the cultural stigma around reporting UAPs, and announces that this will be a dedicated office within the Secretary of Defense, and that their main goal will be creating methodical, standardized databases for categorizing, characterizing, and strategizing all reports of UAPs. He then goes on to show us some very underwhelming footage. And after a lot of confusion and stumbling around, we do get a freeze frame of what we were supposed to look at. It appears to be some type of sphere. Then we get a little more, and they basically say these are drones. We got a couple of good questions. Mr. Carson asked, how can you assure the American people that you guys aren't going after low-hanging fruit and not addressing actual unidentified object, only giving attention to ones that are explainable? From this, we get a standard answer of we're going to do our best to inform the public and maintain national security. As a part of this new effort, they announced that they had 400 reports of UFOs. However, later they say that most of these are historical accounts that they're not able to get any more information on. We also get the question, these videos are so low quality. Do we have the technology to properly investigate these things? And of course, the answer is assuring our national security. This guy asks some great questions. Is there any way for civilians to report? Are these solid objects or made of gas? He says most of these are physical. He's like, gas is physical. Are we sharing data with other countries who are having the same phenomenon? The answer being yes to some. Mr. Gallagher asks, do you know of anything aside from Project Blue Book? Moultrie says, well, of course there's Roswell. He also asks about 2 specific incidents, which they say are not a part of this task force. They make a pretty strong effort to not acknowledge extraterrestrials during this. They say they believe in transparency, but that they currently don't have any evidence that these are of non-terrestrial origin, which was underwhelming, to say the least. Okay, so there was this guy, and his question was about what are going to be the consequences for people who release information about these UAPs that could be potentially false or misinformation? Moultrie says there's no plans to be holding anyone accountable at this point. He wants to know what discourages people if there's no consequences. Well, you're asking the right people, because I want to know what the consequences are for the people who've been lying about this for 50 years to the American public. What will be the consequences? Okay, so Mr. Gallagher had some good questions. Out of everyone today, this is the person I want to talk to about aliens with. Even if Moultrie and Bray have all the classified information, they're not saying nothing. So he asks about the 2019 Admiral Wilson memo, which I was not familiar with. But apparently there's a leaked memo about reverse engineering alien technology. So Bray is like, that's not a part of our task force. Gallagher's like, do you know anything about it? He's like, no, we've never been officially asked to investigate it. He's like, well, I'm asking you right now, and this is official. Then he ends his line of questioning with, can that go on the record, please? And then I want to go back to this. So he had some great questions, one of which being, are you going to investigate civilian cases and sightings? And is there a place for them to be reported? And basically he answers, they want to make sure these are legitimate sightings, that they don't use their resources on things that haven't been brought to their attention by a trained professional. And they feel that they can't prove that a civilian case is legitimate. And at this time, they don't want to use their resources on that. This is one of the biggest takeaways from this whole meeting. So far, the first things that I'm seeing online, people are saying, well, if you're not going to look into civilian cases, then you don't legitimately want to understand what's happening. And then Bray says that they have a good relationship with the FAA, and any civilian cases would come through them. But the FAA is the Federal Aviation Administration. So I don't know how many civilian cases will actually make it there. So one of the main focuses was breaking the stigma around reporting UFOs and UAPs, but it was very specifically for military personnel, not for the stigma in the general public. The stigma among civilians will remain. Okay, so we had another good question. Based on what we know of our allies and adversaries, do we think some of the unidentified ones are from them? There's nothing to make us believe it's non-terrestrial in origin. When I say unexplained, I mean little data. It's interesting. They said as of right now, only one is truly unexplainable. The 2004 incident of the tic-tac shaped object. Someone asked if they were going to investigate underwater, and they said they're going to save that for the closed session after lunch.